Chapter 1. The Quiet Child. The tall ceilings echoed with every step. The marble floors were so shiny that they reflected everything: chandeliers, golden frames, and the endless lines of columns. This was home. A palace of glass and steel that stood high above the busy streets of New York City. For most, it would be a dream. For young Barron Trump, it was quiet. Too quiet. He was only a child, but he already knew his life was different. At 5 years old, Barron understood things that most kids didn't. He knew his father was important. He knew his last name wasn't just a name. It was a brand, a force, and a responsibility. When people said Trump, they either smiled brightly or frowned deeply. But what did that mean for him? He didn't know yet. Barron spent most of his time in his own world. His favorite room was his playroom. It was filled with everything a child could dream of: blocks, much bigger than normal ones, toy cars, some big enough to sit in, and books, rows and rows of colorful books. But Barron didn't need all these things. He was happy sitting by the large windows, watching the city below. Cars looked like ants. People looked like dots. The world below was noisy, busy, and alive. But up here, it was silent. Too silent. "Why don't you play with the other kids?" his mother, Melania, would ask softly. She always spoke softly to him. Her accent made her voice sound like a gentle song. She was his favorite person in the world. She understood him. "I don't want to," Barron would reply, looking at his shoes. Melania would smile a little, but there was sadness in her eyes. She wanted him to be happy. She wanted him to laugh and run like other children. But how could she give him that when the world outside wasn't safe? When every camera wanted a picture of him? When every stranger seemed to have an opinion about him? Barron's father, Donald Trump, was the opposite. Where Melania was quiet, Donald was loud. His voice filled every room he entered. He would call Barron his little guy and pat his head, but Barron sometimes felt small, too small, in his father's presence. Donald was a giant in every way. He was always on the phone, on TV, or giving instructions to someone. "Barron will be the best, the smartest, the strongest," Donald would say proudly to anyone who listened. "He's a Trump, after all." Barron liked hearing that, but it also made him nervous. Was he supposed to be the best at everything? What if he wasn't? School was the hardest part of all. Barron didn't go to a normal school. His classes were private, with only a few other children. His teachers were kind, but the other kids looked at him differently. Sometimes they whispered about him. "His dad owns the whole building," one boy had said once. "That's not true," a girl replied. "He owns the whole city." They weren't exactly wrong. Barron wanted to tell them he was just a normal kid. But he wasn't sure if that was true anymore. At home, things weren't much easier. Even though the Trump penthouse was filled with luxury, it felt lonely. Donald was busy with work. His older siblings were grown up and had their own lives. Melania tried her best to be there for him, but Barron often found himself alone. The staff were kind. They called him Mr. Barron and always smiled at him. But they weren't friends. They were adults who followed his father's orders. Sometimes, when the house was too quiet, Barron would sit in the hallway and listen to their footsteps. It was the only sound that reminded him he wasn't completely alone. But Barron wasn't unhappy all the time. He loved drawing. He could spend hours with his sketchbook, creating castles, dragons, and rockets. His favorite drawing was of a spaceship flying over New York City. In the drawing, the spaceship wasn't just big, it was massive. It covered the whole city, its lights shining down on the people below. "It's me," Barron told his mother one day, pointing to the spaceship. "I'm watching everyone, but they can't see me." Melania's smile faded for a moment. Then she hugged him tightly. "You can be anything you want, my love," she whispered. But could he? Barron wasn't sure. His father wanted him to be strong, bold, and loud. But Barron liked being quiet. He liked staying in the background where no one could find him. His mother said he could choose his own path. But how could he? His last name would always follow him. People would always compare him to his father. One night, Barron couldn't sleep. He walked out of his room and down the long hallway. The lights were dim, and the house felt even bigger at night. He stopped at the large doors to his father's office. Inside, he could hear his father's booming voice. He was talking about deals, buildings, and money. For a moment, Barron imagined himself standing in that office one day, wearing a suit, giving orders. But then, he thought of his spaceship. He thought of flying high above the city, free from everything below. Barron turned away from the door. He didn't want to be like his father. At least, not yet. He wanted to stay quiet for a little while longer. The next morning, Melania found him sitting by the window again, watching the city. "What are you thinking about, my love?" she asked. Barron shrugged. "Just everything." Melania sat beside him and took his hand. "You don't have to figure it all out now," she said. "Just take your time. You are special, Barron, in your own way." Barron didn't say anything, but he squeezed her hand. He didn't know what his future would be. He didn't know if he could be like his father or if he even wanted to be. But for now, he was just Barron. The quiet child. And that was enough. Chapter 2. A Mother's Shield. The cameras flashed like lightning, filling the room with blinding bursts of light. Voices called out from every direction, sharp and loud. "Melania, over here. How is Barron? What's it like being the First Lady?" Melania smiled. It was a soft, practiced smile. The kind that gave nothing away. She moved gracefully, her long coat brushing against the polished floors, but her hand never left Barron's shoulder. He stood close to her side, his small face half hidden behind her. He hated the cameras, the noise, the attention. And Melania knew it. When they finally got into the car, the doors shut with a heavy thud, silencing the chaos outside. Melania exhaled deeply and looked down at Barron. He was staring out of the window, his little hands clenched tightly in his lap. "Are you okay, my love?" she asked, her voice calm and soothing. Barron didn't answer right away. His eyes followed the buildings as they blurred past. Finally, he mumbled, "Why do they always look at me? What do they want?" Melania reached over and smoothed his hair. "They don't know you, Barron. They just see a story. But I know you. That's all that matters." But was it all that mattered? Melania wondered this often, late at night when the world was quiet. Being the First Lady brought challenges she had never imagined. Every move she made was judged. Every word she spoke was analyzed. But none of that mattered as much as Barron. He was her heart, her purpose. She had tried to shield him from the spotlight. She had fought to keep his life as normal as possible. But how could she, when his last name was Trump? One afternoon, the whispers started again. A cruel article about Barron had appeared online. It claimed he was strange, that he wasn't like other children. Melania read the words slowly, her hands trembling with anger. She could handle people judging her. She could even handle people judging her husband. But Barron? No, that was too far. She marched into Donald's office, the article clutched in her hand. "Have you seen this?" she demanded, her voice sharper than usual. Donald glanced up from his desk, raising an eyebrow. "What is it now?" "Look what they are saying about Barron," she said, holding the paper out to him. Her voice cracked slightly, but her eyes were fierce. Donald skimmed the article, his expression unreadable. "It's just nonsense," he said finally. "People will talk. You know that." "But he's a child," Melania shot back. "They shouldn't talk about him like this. It's not fair." Donald leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "It's part of the package, Melania. They talk about all of us. Barron will get used to it." Melania shook her head. "He shouldn't have to get used to it. He's only 10 years old. He's innocent." Her voice softened on the last word, but her determination didn't waver. Donald sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fine. I'll talk to someone. We'll handle it." But Melania wasn't satisfied. She didn't trust the world to protect Barron. If anyone was going to fight for him, it would be her. That evening, she found Barron sitting on the carpet in his room, drawing. His sketchbook was open, and he was carefully coloring in a picture of a castle. It was surrounded by high walls and guarded by knights with shields. Melania sat down beside him, watching quietly. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "It's a castle," Barron said without looking up. "No one can get inside." The walls are too high. Melania's heart ached at his words. She placed a gentle hand on his back. You don't need walls, Barron. You have me. I will protect you. Barron stopped coloring and looked up at her. But you can't stop them from looking at me, he said softly. Melania didn't know what to say. He was right. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make the cameras disappear. She couldn't stop the whispers, but she could make sure he always felt loved. The next day, she made a decision. She would take Barron away from the noise, even if just for a little while. She packed their bags and arranged for a quiet trip to her homeland, Slovenia. It was a place where she had been just another girl, where there were no skyscrapers or reporters. She wanted Barron to see a world beyond the flashing cameras and tall walls. The air in Slovenia was fresh and cool. Barron's face lit up as they walked through the small village where Melania had grown up. He saw animals in fields, children playing without a care, and old houses with wooden roofs. Did you live here? Barron asked, wide-eyed. Melania nodded. Yes, it was simple, but it was home. Barron ran ahead, his laughter echoing through the quiet streets. For the first time in a long time, Melania saw him smile without hesitation. It was as if the weight of his world had been lifted, even if just for a moment. But even in Slovenia, the whispers found them. One afternoon, as they walked through a market, a man stopped them. He pointed at Barron and said, "That's Trump's son, isn't it?" Melania stepped forward, placing herself between the man and Barron. Her face was calm, but her voice was firm. "He is my son," she said, "and he is just a child." The man nodded awkwardly and walked away, but the encounter stayed with Melania. No matter where they went, Barron would always be seen as more than just a boy. She couldn't change that, but she could make sure he knew that he was loved, not for his last name, but for who he was. As they returned to New York, Melania felt more determined than ever. She couldn't silence the world. She couldn't stop the cameras or the gossip, but she could stand by Barron's side. She could teach him to be strong, to hold his head high, and to find peace in the chaos. "You're my son," she told him one night as she tucked him into bed, "and that is the most important thing in the world to me. Not the cameras, not the people. You." Barron smiled sleepily. "I know, Mama," he said. And for Melania, that was enough. Chapter 3. The White House Shadows. The car pulled up slowly. The tall gates of the White House opened, and Barron stared out of the window. The mansion looked even bigger than he remembered. Its white walls shone in the sunlight. The flags waved in the wind. Secret Service agents stood everywhere, watching everything. Barron's heart pounded. He was about to live here. This wasn't just a house. It was history. Presidents had walked these halls. Important decisions had been made in its rooms. And now, it was going to be his home. But it didn't feel like home. Inside, the White House was even more intimidating. The ceilings were high, and the walls were lined with old paintings of serious-looking men. The air smelled like polished wood and flowers. The floors were so clean that Barron could see his reflection. "This is it," his father said, his voice booming as usual. "The greatest house in the world. What do you think, Barron?" Barron shrugged, avoiding his father's eyes. "It's big," he said quietly. Donald laughed. "Big? It's huge. You'll love it, son." But Barron wasn't so sure. His mother walked beside him, holding his hand. "Don't worry, my love," she whispered. "We will make it comfortable for you." They walked through room after room. Each one was grander than the last. There was the blue room with its shiny gold furniture, the Lincoln bedroom with its old, creaky bed, and the Oval Office, where his father would spend most of his time. Barron didn't say much. He couldn't stop thinking about how quiet the house felt. It wasn't the same kind of quiet as their home in New York. This quiet felt heavy, like the house was waiting for something. That night, Barron couldn't sleep. His new bedroom was huge, with a 4-poster bed and thick curtains that blocked out the moonlight. But it didn't feel cozy. He missed his old room. He missed the familiar sounds of the city outside his window. He climbed out of bed and opened the door. The hallway was dark, and his footsteps echoed as he walked. The house felt alive in a strange way. The wooden floors creaked. The old walls seemed to sigh. Barron turned a corner and stopped. A portrait of Abraham Lincoln stared down at him. The eyes in the painting seemed to follow him, no matter where he stood. Barron shivered and hurried back to his room. The next morning, breakfast was served in the state dining room. The long table stretched on, covered with fancy plates and silverware. Barron sat at one end while his father sat at the other. It felt like they were miles apart. "So, how are you liking it so far?" Donald asked between bites of toast. Barron hesitated. "It's okay," he said. "Okay?" his father repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Barron, this is the White House. You're part of history now. Isn't that exciting?" Barron didn't answer. He glanced at his mother, who gave him a reassuring smile. But even her smile couldn't make him feel better. He wasn't excited. He felt small, too small for a place like this. At school, things were no easier. Barron was now attending a private school near the White House. The other kids treated him differently. Some were overly nice, trying too hard to be his friend. Others stared at him, whispering behind his back. "He's the president's son," one boy said into another. "I bet he has Secret Service agents in his classroom." Barron tried to ignore them, but the words stung. He just wanted to be normal. But how could he, when even his classmates saw him as something else? One afternoon, Barron overheard 2 staff members talking in the hallway. They didn't notice him standing nearby. "Poor kid," one of them said. "Must be tough, living under such a spotlight." "Yeah," the other replied, But he's a trump. He'll be fine. They're used to the attention. Barron felt a lump in his throat. I'm not used to it, he thought. I'm just a kid. The days turned into weeks, and Barron began to explore the White House more. He discovered hidden staircases, quiet libraries, and old, dusty rooms that no one seemed to use anymore. His favorite place was the garden. It was the only spot where he felt like he could breathe. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, he found his mother sitting on a bench. She was looking at the flowers, lost in thought. "Do you like it here?" Barron asked, sitting beside her. Melania looked at him and smiled gently. "It is not about liking it," she said. "It is about what we must do." Barron frowned. "But I didn't ask to be here. I don't want everyone looking at me all the time." Melania placed a hand on his knee. "I know, my love. It is not easy. But we must be strong. You must be strong. One day, you will understand." That night, Barron lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet again, but now it felt different. The silence wasn't just heavy, it was alive. It felt like the walls were holding secrets, like the house itself was watching him. He thought about the presidents who had lived here before: Lincoln, Kennedy, Roosevelt. What had it been like for their families? Had their children felt the same pressure he felt now? Did they also feel like they were living in the shadows of something much bigger than themselves? The next morning, Barron made a decision. If this was his life now, he would face it. He didn't know how, but he would try. When he walked into the dining room, he greeted his father first. "Good morning," he said clearly. Donald looked up from his newspaper and smiled. "That's my boy," he said, giving Barron a thumbs up. Barron smiled back, but inside, he still felt unsure. He wasn't sure if he could ever feel at home in the White House. But for now, he would take it one day at a time. And so, Barron began to find his way in the shadow of the White House. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always happy. But he was learning. Slowly, but surely, he was learning. Chapter 4. Invisible Chains. Barron watched from the window. The park across the street was filled with kids. They ran, laughed, and shouted, their voices carrying up to his room. One boy kicked a ball so hard it rolled into the street, and he ran after it, carefree and fearless. Barron sighed. He wanted to be like them, just for a little while. "Why can't I go?" he whispered to himself. The door to his room opened, and his mother stepped in. "Barron, lunch is ready," Melania said, her voice soft. Barron didn't turn around. "Mama, why can't I go to the park?" Melania paused. She walked over and stood beside him, looking out at the children below. "It is not safe," she said finally. "But why?" Barron asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "There are bodyguards. They can watch me." Melania knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "It is not just about safety," she explained. "People. They watch everything you do. They talk about you. They take pictures. You deserve your privacy." "But I don't feel private," Barron exclaimed, his voice breaking. "I feel like I'm in a cage. Everywhere I go, people look at me. I just want to be normal." Melania's heart ached. She wanted to tell him that things would get easier, that one day he would feel free, but she couldn't lie to him. His life was not normal, and it never would be. "You are not in a cage," she said softly. "You are protected. There is a difference." "It doesn't feel different," Barron muttered, pulling away from her. Melania kissed the top of his head. "You will understand someday, my love. But for now, you must trust me." Barron didn't answer. He just stared out the window as the children in the park played on, unaware of the boy watching them from above. The next day, Barron was determined. He didn't want to stay inside anymore. He waited until the house was quiet, the staff busy with their tasks. He slipped on his sneakers, grabbed a baseball cap, and pulled it low over his face. He knew the way out. He had seen the route before. Down the main staircase, through the side door. The Secret Service wouldn't expect him to leave without asking. His heart pounded as he crept through the hallways. Every creak of the floorboards made him freeze. What if someone stopped him? What would they say? Finally, he reached the door. He opened it slowly, holding his breath. The warm summer air hit his face, and for a moment he smiled. He had done it. He stepped outside and started walking quickly toward the park. He kept his head down, hoping no one would recognize him. But as he crossed the street, he heard someone call out, "Hey! Isn't that Barron Trump?" Barron's chest tightened. He didn't turn around. He started walking faster, his hands shaking. "Barron, wait," the voice called again. Suddenly, two men in suits appeared in front of him. Secret Service. Their expressions were serious, their movements quick. One of them gently grabbed his arm. "Mr. Trump, we need to go back now," the agent said firmly. "No!" Barron shouted, pulling away. "I just want to go to the park. Leave me alone." "Sir, we can't allow that," the agent replied, his tone calm but unyielding. "It's for your safety." "I don't care," Barron yelled, his voice breaking. "I don't want to be safe. I just want to be normal." The agents didn't let go. They guided Barron back toward the White House, ignoring the people who had gathered to watch. Some had their phones out, taking pictures and videos. Barron felt his face burn with embarrassment. He could hear the whispers around him. Poor kid. Why does he have so many bodyguards? I can't imagine growing up like that. When they reached the White House, Melania was waiting for him at the door. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. As soon as she saw him, she pulled him into her arms. "Barron, what were you thinking?" she cried, holding him tightly. Barron didn't answer. He felt tears sting his eyes, but he blinked them away. Melania knelt in front of him, gripping his shoulders. "Do you understand how dangerous that was?" she said, her voice trembling. "Anything could have happened to you." "But nothing happened," Barron shouted back, his voice cracking. "I just wanted to play like other kids. Why is that so bad?" "It's not bad," Melania said, her tone softening. "But you are not like other kids, Barron. You have to be careful. You have to be protected." "I don't want to be protected," Barron yelled. "I just want to be free." Melania's heart broke at his words. She pulled him into another hug, holding him close. "I know, my love," she whispered. "I know it's hard, but I promise I am doing this for you, to keep you safe." Barron didn't hug her back. He felt trapped, frustrated, and tired of the rules that seemed to control his life. That night, Barron sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. He thought about the kids in the park, the way they ran and played without a care in the world. He thought about the cameras, the bodyguards, and the whispers that followed him everywhere. He felt like a bird in a gilded cage. The cage was beautiful, yes, but it was still a cage. Melania came into his room and sat beside him. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat there, her presence calming. "Barron," she said finally, her voice soft. "I know you feel trapped, but you are strong. You can handle this." "I don't want to handle it," Barron said quietly. "I just want to be normal." Melania placed a hand on his back. "You are normal. You are my son, and that is all that matters." Barron didn't reply. He didn't believe her, not yet. But deep down, a small part of him hoped she was right. Chapter 5. The Son of Power. The name Trump was everywhere. Barron couldn't escape it. It was on the news every day, in bold letters on tall buildings, and in the voices of strangers who whispered as he walked by. It was a name that made people stop and stare. Sometimes they smiled, sometimes they frowned, but they always noticed. For Barron, it wasn't just a name. It was a shadow, one that followed him wherever he went. One morning, Barron sat in the kitchen, eating his cereal. The TV was on, as usual, and the news anchor was talking about his father. "President Trump faces criticism for his latest decision," the voice said. Barron sighed. His father's name echoed through the room, filling the silence. Even here, in the safety of their home, the world outside felt so close. "Do they always talk about him?" Barron asked his mother, who was pouring herself a cup of tea. Melania looked at him, her face calm but thoughtful. "Yes, my love," she said. "He is the president. People care about what he does." But they don't even know him, Barron said, frowning. Not really. Melania sat down beside him. That is true, but they think they do. When someone is powerful, everyone has an opinion about them. Later that day, Barron went to his private tutor. He usually liked studying. It gave him something to focus on. But today, he couldn't concentrate. His mind kept wandering. The tutor noticed and asked him, "Is something wrong, Barron?" Barron hesitated, then shook his head. "No, I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. He felt heavy, like he was carrying something he couldn't explain. That evening, his father came home late, as usual. Donald walked into the dining room, his phone in one hand and a folder in the other. He barely looked up as he greeted Barron. "How's my little guy?" he asked, patting Barron on the shoulder. "I'm fine," Barron replied quietly. Donald didn't seem to notice Barron's mood. He was already talking about his day, about meetings, decisions, and deals. "Everyone's watching us, son," Donald said with a grin. "It's amazing. They can't stop talking about the Trump name." Barron stayed silent. His father's excitement didn't make him feel proud. It made him feel small. That night, Barron lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. His father's words echoed in his mind. They can't stop talking about the Trump name. But what about his name? Barron didn't want to be just Trump's son. He wanted to be someone on his own. But how could he when the world only saw him as part of his father's story? The next day, Barron had soccer practice. He loved playing soccer. It was one of the only times he felt free. When he was on the field, he didn't have to think about his last name or the cameras. He could just run, kick, and play. But even here, the shadow followed him. "Hey, Trump!" one of the boys shouted as Barron scored a goal. "Nice shot, man!" Barron frowned. He didn't like being called Trump. He wanted to say, "I have a first name, you know." But he didn't. He kept playing, pretending it didn't bother him. After practice, a group of kids gathered around him. One of them asked, "So, what's it like living in the White House?" Another added, "Do you ever talk to world leaders?" Barron tried to answer their questions, but they kept coming. "Do you get to fly in Air Force One? Is your dad really as rich as they say? What's he like at home?" Barron felt overwhelmed. "I don't know," he said, finally, his voice sharp. "I don't think about it." The kids looked surprised. They didn't mean to upset him. But Barron walked away, his heart heavy again. At dinner that night, Barron finally spoke up. "Dad," he said, looking across the table, "why does everyone care so much about our name?" Donald put down his fork, clearly surprised. "What do you mean?" "Everyone keeps talking about you." "About us," Barron said. "It's like they think they know us, but they don't. It's weird. Donald smiled. That's because our name means something, Barron. It's power, respect, success. But what about me? Barron asked, his voice quieter now. What if I don't want to be all those things? What if I just want to be me? Donald looked at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, You're part of this family, son. That name will always be yours, but what you do with it is up to you. That night, Barron thought about his father's words. What you do with it is up to you. Could it really be that simple? Could he choose to be more than just the president's son? More than a Trump? The next morning, Barron woke up early. He grabbed his sketchbook and began drawing. He didn't draw castles or rockets this time. Instead, he drew himself, standing tall, holding a soccer ball in one hand and a pencil in the other. In the background, the Trump name was written in bold letters. But this time, it wasn't overshadowing him. It was just there. When he showed the drawing to his mother, she smiled. This is beautiful, Barron, she said. You are finding your own story. Barron looked at the drawing again. For the first time, he felt a little lighter. The name Trump would always be a part of him, but it didn't have to define him. He was Barron. Just Barron. And that was enough. Before we begin Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on WooEnglish. Remember, this content is specially made for WooEnglish listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of WooEnglish's rights. Please ensure you're tuned into the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6. Friends or Foes? The classroom buzzed with laughter and chatter. Barron sat at his desk, pretending to be focused on his book, but his mind wandered. He glanced at his classmates. They seemed so carefree, so normal. He wanted to feel like that too. Hey, Barron, a boy's voice called. It was Ethan, one of the few kids Barron talked to at school. Barron looked up and smiled a little. Hi. Do you want to sit with us at lunch today? Ethan asked, gesturing toward a small group of kids in the corner. They were laughing and joking, their voices echoing in the large classroom. Barron hesitated. He wasn't sure if they really wanted him there or if they were just curious about him, but Ethan seemed genuine. Sure, Barron said quietly. At lunch, Barron sat with Ethan and his friends. They asked him a lot of questions, but not the usual ones about his dad or the White House. Instead, they asked about his favorite video games, soccer, and what movies he liked. For the first time in a while, Barron felt normal. He laughed at their jokes and even shared a story about his dog. For a moment, he forgot about the cameras, the security, and the heavy weight of his name. But deep down, he still felt a small doubt. Could he trust them? Or were they just being nice because of who he was? A few days later, Ethan came over to Barron's table again. Hey, Barron, he said with a grin. I was wondering, What's it like living in the White House? Do you get to see the president every day? Barron froze. The question caught him off guard. Ethan had never asked about his family before. It felt strange. "It's okay, I guess," Barron said cautiously. Ethan nodded, his grin growing wider. "Come on, you must have some cool stories. Like, what's your room like? Do you ever see famous people?" Barron shrugged. "Sometimes." Ethan leaned in closer. "You can tell me, Barron. I won't tell anyone. Promise." Barron looked at him for a moment. Ethan seemed so friendly, so eager to listen. Maybe it was safe to share a little. Maybe he was just curious. "Well," Barron began, lowering his voice, "sometimes my dad has meetings with really important people. I've met some of them before." Ethan's eyes widened. "Like who?" Barron hesitated. He wasn't supposed to talk about these things, but Ethan was his friend, wasn't he? "Just people," Barron said finally, trying to change the subject. "It's not a big deal." The next day, Barron walked into school and felt the stares. Kids were whispering, glancing at him, and then quickly looking away. His stomach twisted. Something was wrong. At lunchtime, Ethan was nowhere to be seen. Barron sat alone, feeling uneasy. That's when one of the teachers approached him, holding a newspaper. "Barron," she said gently, "I think you should see this." Barron's heart sank as he looked at the headline. It was about him. A tabloid article filled with private details about his life, about his father's meetings, about his room in the White House, things he had only told Ethan. His hands trembled as he put the paper down. Ethan had betrayed him. He had shared Barron's secrets with the press, for money, or attention, or both. When Barron saw Ethan in the hallway later, he confronted him. "Why did you do it?" Barron asked, his voice shaking with anger. Ethan tried to smile, but it looked forced. "It's not a big deal, Barron. People were curious, and they paid me a lot." Barron's chest tightened. "You promised you wouldn't tell anyone." Ethan shrugged. "It's just stuff, Barron. It's not like I said anything bad about you." "But it wasn't your story to tell," Barron snapped. His voice echoed down the hallway, and a few kids stopped to stare. Ethan looked uncomfortable. "Look, I didn't think you'd care that much. You're used to this kind of stuff, right? People talking about you?" Barron felt tears sting his eyes, but he refused to cry in front of Ethan. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not used to it, and I thought you were my friend." Without waiting for a reply, Barron turned and walked away, his heart heavy with betrayal. That evening, Barron sat in his room, staring at the newspaper. The words blurred as his mind raced. He had trusted Ethan. He had let his guard down. And now, everyone knew things about his life that were supposed to be private. Melania walked into the room and saw the paper on his desk. Her face softened with concern. "Barron, what happened?" she asked, sitting beside him. Barron told her everything. About Ethan, about the betrayal, about how he felt like he couldn't trust anyone. Melania listened quietly, her hand resting on his back. When he finished, she said softly, "I am so sorry, my love. Sometimes people will disappoint you, but this does not mean you should close your heart." "How can I trust anyone now?" Barron asked, his voice small. Melania thought for a moment. "Trust is like a plant," she said. "It takes time to grow. You must choose carefully who you give it to. Not everyone deserves it, but some people do. You will find them." Barron didn't feel comforted. Not yet. But he nodded. His mother's words stayed with him as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. The next day at school, Barron avoided everyone. He didn't talk. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He felt like a wall had gone up inside him. A wall to keep people out, to keep himself safe. But deep down, he didn't want to live behind a wall forever. He wanted friends. Real friends. People he could trust. For now, though, he stayed quiet. He stayed guarded. He had learned his lesson. Trust was precious, and not everyone deserved it. Chapter 7. A World Divided. Barron sat in the back seat of the car, staring out the window. The streets were full of people, holding signs and chanting. Some of the signs had his father's name in bold letters. Some were supportive. Others were not. He pressed his forehead against the glass, feeling a strange mix of emotions. He had seen protests on TV before, but seeing it in person was different. It was louder. It was angrier. It felt real. "Why are they so mad, Mama?" he asked softly, turning to his mother. Melania, sitting beside him, glanced at the crowd. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed worry. "People have different opinions," she said gently. "They do not always agree with your father, or with us." "But why do they hate us?" Barron asked. His voice cracked. He wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Melania reached over and squeezed his hand. "Not everyone hates us, my love. Many people care about what your father does. They believe in him. But being in this family means we will always have people who disagree." Barron nodded, but the words didn't make him feel any better. He leaned back in his seat, trying to ignore the shouting outside. It was hard not to take it personally. He was just a kid. Why did these people care about him or his family so much? As they pulled into the White House gates, the noise faded, replaced by the quiet hum of security. Barron stepped out of the car, his heart still heavy. The protest might have been outside, but it felt like it followed him inside. The next day at school, Barron felt the weight of the world more than ever. The whispers started as soon as he walked into the classroom. "Did you see the news?" one boy whispered to another. "There was a huge protest outside the White House yesterday." "Yeah," the other boy replied. "My parents said it's because of something Barron's dad did." Barron clenched his fists. He tried to ignore them, but the words stuck in his mind. They were talking about his family, like they were a headline, like they weren't real people. At lunchtime, he sat alone. He didn't feel like dealing with anyone, but even from across the cafeteria, he could feel the stares. He wondered what they were thinking. Were they judging him? Did they blame him for his father's decisions? That evening, Barron sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He knew he shouldn't look at social media, but he couldn't help himself. The comments were everywhere. Trump's son is probably just like him. Poor kid. He didn't choose this life. He's rich. What does he have to complain about? Barron put his phone down, his chest tight. He felt trapped between two worlds. On one side, people expected him to be just like his father, confident, bold, and powerful. On the other side, people assumed he was spoiled and didn't understand how hard life could be. But no one really saw him. The real him. Later that night, Barron found his mother in the kitchen. She was sitting at the counter, a cup of tea in her hands. She looked up when he walked in and smiled softly. "What's wrong, Barron?" she asked. She always seemed to know when something was bothering him. Barron sat down across from her. "Why does everyone think they know me?" he asked, his voice small. "They don't know what I'm like. They don't know what it's like to be me." Melania reached across the table and took his hand to his hand. "You are right," she said. "They do not know you, but you cannot let their opinions change who you are." "It's hard, Mama," Barron said. "Everywhere I go, people talk about me, or Dad, or us. It's like I can't just be Barron. I'm always Trump's son." Melania nodded, her face thoughtful. "It is not fair," she admitted. "But you must remember, you are more than your last name. You are strong, kind, smart, and you are my son." Barron felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to believe her, but it was hard. The world seemed so divided. He didn't know where he fit in. The next day at school, Barron faced another challenge. During history class, the teacher started a discussion about the presidency. One of the students raised their hand and said, "I think the president is doing a terrible job. My parents say he only cares about himself." Barron froze. He could feel everyone's eyes on him. The teacher glanced at Barron, then quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. Barron felt like he was shrinking in his seat. He wanted to say something, to defend his father. But what could he say? After class, one of the boys approached him. "Hey, Barron," he said awkwardly. "I didn't mean anything by what I said in there. I was just repeating what my parents told me." Barron nodded, but he didn't respond. He didn't trust himself to speak without his voice shaking. That evening, Barron sat alone in the garden behind the White House. The air was cool, and the stars were just starting to appear. He thought about everything that had happened over the past few days. The protests, the whispers, the stares. He felt like he was caught in the middle of a world that was always arguing, a world that judged him before knowing him. But as he looked up at the stars, he remembered his mother's words. "You are more than your last name." Barron took a deep breath. Maybe he couldn't change how people saw him. Maybe the world would always be divided. But he could decide how he saw himself. And that was a start. Chapter 8. The Weight of Expectations. The dining room was filled with the warm glow of chandeliers. The long table was set with fine china, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. Barron sat at one end, his father at the other. His mother sat between them. Her face calm as always. The table was quiet, except for the clinking of silverware. Barron picked at his food, barely touching it. His mind was elsewhere. He felt the weight of the room, the weight of the expectations that seemed to follow him everywhere. "Barron." Donald's voice boomed suddenly, breaking the silence. "You've been quiet. What's on your mind?" Barron looked up, startled. His father's eyes were sharp, focused on him. Barron hesitated, then shrugged. "Nothing." "Come on," Donald said, leaning back in his chair. "You're a trump. You've always got something to say. Let's hear it." Barron clenched his fork tightly. He wanted to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He felt his mother's gentle gaze on him, silently encouraging him to talk. I was just thinking," Barron began slowly, "about what I want to do when I grow up." Donald grinned. "That's my boy. Planning for the future already. So, what is it? Real estate? Business? Maybe politics?" Barron looked down at his plate. His father's voice was filled with excitement, but Barron didn't share it. "Actually, I don't think I want to do any of those things," he said quietly. The room fell silent. Donald's smile faded, replaced by a frown. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice firm. "You're a trump. Business and politics are in your blood." Barron shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He could feel his father's eyes on him, heavy with expectation. "I know," he said softly, "but I don't think it's for me." "What do you mean it's not for you?" Donald asked, his tone growing sharper. "You've got everything you need to succeed. You've got the name, the resources, the connections. You can do anything." Barron looked up, his hands trembling. "But I don't want to be known just because of my name," he said, his voice breaking. "I want to do something that's mine, something I care about." Melania placed a gentle hand on Barron's shoulder. "It's okay, Barron," she said softly. "Tell us what you mean." Barron took a deep breath. "I like soccer," he said. "I want to play professionally, or maybe study art. I love drawing. I want to do something that makes me happy." Donald's expression hardened. "Soccer? Art? Barron, those are hobbies, not careers. You're part of this family. You have responsibilities." Barron felt a lump in his throat. "Why can't I decide what I want to do?" he asked, his voice rising. "Why does it have to be what you want?" The tension in the room was thick. Donald leaned forward, his voice low and firm. "Because you're a trump," he said. The world is watching you. They expect you to be great, to lead. You can't just walk away from that. Barron stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "I didn't ask for this," he shouted. "I didn't ask to be a trump or to have the world watching me. I just want to be me." Donald opened his mouth to respond, but Melania raised a hand, stopping him. She turned to Barron, her eyes filled with understanding. "Barron," she said gently, "sit down. Let's talk about this." Barron hesitated, then slowly sat back down. His hands were clenched into fists, his heart racing. Melania looked at Donald, then back at Barron. "Your father is right about one thing," she said carefully. "The world does have expectations for you, but you also have the right to choose your own path. You are young. You have time to figure it out." Barron felt a small flicker of hope. "Really?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Yes," Melania said firmly. "But," she added, glancing at Donald, "you must also understand that being in this family comes with challenges. Whatever you choose, people will always have opinions about it." Donald sighed, his expression softening slightly. "Look, Barron," he said, his tone less sharp, "I just want what's best for you. I know how hard the world can be. I don't want you to waste your potential." Barron met his father's gaze. "I know, Dad," he said, "but I need to figure out what my potential is, not just follow what everyone expects." The room fell silent again, but this time it felt different. The tension was still there, but so was a sense of understanding. Barron had spoken his truth, and for the first time, his father seemed to really hear him. "I'll think about it," Donald said finally, his voice gruff. "But don't think this means you can slack off. Whatever you decide to do, you'll need to work hard. Understand?" Barron nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I understand." That night, Barron sat in his room, sketching in his notebook. He felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. For the first time, he felt like his dreams were within reach. They wouldn't be easy to achieve, but they were his. He glanced out the window at the city lights. The world outside was still big and overwhelming, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. Barron was starting to see a future that belonged to him, not just to his name. And that was a good start. Chapter 9. Between Two Worlds. The plane descended slowly, and Barron looked out of the window. The landscape below was different from anything he had ever seen. Rolling green hills, small villages with red roofs, and narrow roads winding through forests. "This is Slovenia?" he asked his mother, his voice filled with curiosity. "Yes," Melania replied with a soft smile. "This is where I grew up. It is not like New York or Washington, but it is home." Barron nodded, pressing his forehead to the glass. He had seen pictures of Slovenia before, but being here felt different. It was quiet, peaceful, simple. He liked it already. When they arrived at the small village where his mother had grown up, Barron couldn't stop staring. The houses were small and cozy, with flower boxes under the windows. People waved as they passed, their faces kind and warm. "It's so different," Barron said. "Everyone's so friendly." Melania laughed softly. "Yes, my love. Life here is slower. People take time to know each other. There is no rush." Barron followed his mother through the village, listening as she spoke to the locals in her native language. They smiled at him, some patting his shoulder or saying something he didn't understand. He smiled back, feeling a strange sense of calm. They stayed in a small house that belonged to Melania's sister. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. Barron's room had a wooden bed, a small desk, and a window that overlooked the hills. At night, he could hear crickets chirping and the soft rustle of leaves. "This is so different from the White House," Barron said one evening as he sat by the window. Melania joined him, looking out at the darkened hills. "Yes," she said softly, "but sometimes a simple life is the happiest life." Barron thought about her words. He loved the quiet of Slovenia. He loved the way people treated him like a normal boy, not the son of a president. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. During their visit, Barron spent his days exploring. He hiked through the hills, picking wildflowers and watching birds. He helped his mother's family with chores, like feeding the chickens and picking vegetables from the garden. One afternoon, he sat by a small river, dipping his feet into the cool water. He felt happy. It was a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. But the peace didn't last forever. One evening, as Barron and Melania walked through the village, a man approached them. He held a camera and started taking pictures. Melania immediately stepped in front of Barron, her expression sharp. "No," she said firmly, her voice strong despite her calm tone. "Please, leave us alone." The man hesitated, but then he lowered his camera and walked away. Barron watched him go, his chest tightening. He had forgotten, just for a little while, that his life was never truly private. The next morning, Barron woke up to find his name in the news again. A picture of him by the river had been posted online, along with an article about his visit to Slovenia. It wasn't anything negative, but it still stung. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" Barron asked his mother at breakfast. "I'm just a kid." Melania placed a hand on his arm. "I know, my love," she said softly. "But this is our life. People will always be curious." Barron frowned. "I don't want them to be curious. I just want to live." Melania's face softened, and she reached across the table to hold his hand. "You are stronger than you know, Barron," she said. "You can find peace, even in a life like ours, but you must choose it." When it was time to leave Slovenia, Barron felt a deep sadness. He didn't want to go back to the loud, busy world of Washington. He didn't want to face the cameras, the whispers, or the expectations. On the plane ride home, he stared out the window, watching the hills disappear into the clouds. "I wish we could stay," he said quietly. Melania placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know," she said, "but the world is waiting for us, and you are strong enough to face it." Back in Washington, the noise of the city hit him like a wave. The crowds, the cameras, the constant hum of activity. It was overwhelming. Barron returned to his routine, but something felt different. He couldn't stop thinking about Slovenia, about the peace he had felt there, about the boy he had been in that small village, free, happy, and unburdened. One evening, Barron sat in the White House garden, sketching in his notebook. He drew the hills of Slovenia, the small houses, and the river where he had sat. His father walked by and stopped, looking over his shoulder. "What's that?" Donald asked. "Slovenia," Barron replied without looking up. Donald frowned slightly. "You really liked it there, didn't you?" Barron nodded. "It felt real. Like life. There is about more than just money or power." Donald sat down beside him, a rare moment of quiet between them. "Life is different everywhere," he said, "but no matter where you are, you have to find your own way, your own purpose." Barron looked at his father, surprised by his words. "Do you think I can?" he asked. Donald smiled faintly. "You're my son," he said. "Of course you can." That night, Barron thought about his father's words. He realized that he didn't have to choose between two worlds. He could carry the peace of Slovenia with him, even in the chaos of his life. He could be strong like his father and calm like his mother. He could find his own way. And for the first time, he believed it. Chapter 10. Breaking the Silence. The morning started like any other. Barron sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone as he sipped his orange juice. But then, he saw it. A headline. Bold and cruel. Barron Trump. Troubled teen or problem child. His stomach dropped. The article was full of lies, stories about him skipping school, fighting with his parents, and being spoiled beyond belief. None of it was true, but the words hurt. He threw his phone down, his hands trembling. "Why do they do this?" he muttered. "Why do they make up stories about me?" Melania looked up from her tea, her expression calm but concerned. "It is what people do when they do not know the truth," she said, "but you must not let it get to you." "It's not fair," Barron said, his voice rising. "I don't even talk to the press. How can they write these things when they've never even met me?" Melania walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know it is unfair, my love," she said softly. "But staying quiet is sometimes the best way." But Barron shook his head. "Not this time," he said firmly. "I'm tired of being quiet. I'm tired of letting people think they can say whatever they want about me." That afternoon, Barron sat in his room, staring at a blank page in his notebook. His mind raced. What would he say? How could he explain what it was like to live his life? After a few moments, he picked up his pen and began to write. The words flowed out of him, raw and honest. He wrote about the cameras, the whispers, and the pressure to be perfect. He wrote about how lonely it felt to live in a world where everyone thought they knew him. When he finished, he read it over. His hands were shaking, but his heart felt lighter. He knew what he had to do. The next day, Barron asked his parents if he could speak publicly. At first, Donald raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this, son?" he asked. "Once you say something, you can't take it back." "I'm sure," Barron said. "I need people to know the truth. I need them to know who I really am." Melania nodded, her face filled with pride. "If this is what you want, Barron, we will support you." A week later, Barron stood backstage at a press conference. The room beyond was filled with reporters, their cameras pointed at the podium. His heart pounded as he peeked out at the crowd. He had never spoken in front of so many people before. "You've got this," Melania whispered, squeezing his hand. Donald gave him a pat on the back. "Go out there and show them who you are," he said. Barron nodded, taking a deep breath. Then he stepped out onto the stage. The cameras flashed as Barron approached the microphone. He gripped the edges of the podium, his palms sweaty. For a moment, he couldn't speak. The room was so quiet, he could hear his own heartbeat. Then he looked up and saw his mother, standing in the wings. Her eyes were filled with encouragement. He thought of her strength, and it gave him courage. "My name is Barron Trump," he began, his voice steady but soft. "For years, I've stayed silent. I've let people say things about me, things that aren't true. I thought it was easier that way, but today I want to speak for myself." The room was silent, every eye on him. "I am not just the president's son," Barron continued. "I am a person. I have feelings. I have dreams. And I am more than the stories people write about me." He paused, his hands gripping the podium tighter. It's hard to grow up when the world is watching your every move. It's hard to be a kid when people expect you to be perfect. And it's even harder when people think they know you, but they don't. Barron's voice wavered, but he kept going. "I've been called spoiled. I've been called troubled. I've been called things that hurt, things that aren't true. And I want to ask everyone listening, how would you feel if people talked about you like that? If they judged you without knowing you?" He glanced down at his notes, then looked back at the crowd. "I'm just a teenager. I like soccer. I like drawing. I love my family. And I'm doing my best to figure out who I am, just like any other kid." The room remained quiet, but Barron could see the reporters leaning forward, hanging on his every word. "I'm not here to blame anyone," he said. "I know I come from a family that people have strong opinions about. But I want to remind everyone, behind every headline, there is a person. Behind every picture, There is a story you don't know. He took a deep breath, his voice growing stronger. I hope that after today, people will think twice before they believe everything they read. And I hope they will remember that even people in the spotlight deserve kindness. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. Barron stepped back from the microphone, his chest heaving. He had done it. He had spoken his truth. His mother met him as he walked off stage, wrapping him in a tight hug. I am so proud of you, she whispered. Donald clapped him on the back, his face filled with pride. You were great out there, son, he said. You showed them who you really are. That night, Barron sat in his room, scrolling through the news. Articles about his speech were everywhere, but this time they were different. They called him brave. They praised his honesty. For the first time, Barron felt like the world was seeing him for who he really was. Not just the president's son, but a person with his own voice. And for the first time, he felt free. Chapter 11. Stepping Out of the Shadow. The air felt lighter after Barron's speech. For the first time in years, he felt like people saw him for who he was, a teenager, not just a name. But even as the applause faded and the headlines turned kind, Barron knew his journey wasn't over. He still had to figure out one important thing: who he wanted to be. A few weeks later, Barron sat in his room, flipping through his sketchbook. Each page held a piece of him: drawings of soccer players, dreamlike cities, and even his family. He smiled at a sketch of his dog before turning to a blank page. He picked up his pencil, but hesitated. The same question kept coming back to him. What comes next? At dinner that evening, Barron's father brought it up. So, Barron, Donald said, cutting into his steak. Now that you've had your big moment, what's your plan? Barron looked up from his plate, caught off guard. My plan? Donald nodded. You've shown the world who you are, but people are going to want to know more. What are you going to do with this attention? Barron glanced at his mother. Melania gave him a small, encouraging smile. It's okay, Barron, she said. Take your time to think. But Donald leaned forward. You can't take too long, he said firmly. You've got momentum now. You need to use it. Barron felt his chest tighten. His father's words were heavy, as if the weight of the Trump name had returned, pressing down on him. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I don't want to rush into something just because people expect me to. Donald frowned, but didn't argue. Melania reached over and squeezed Barron's hand. You will find your path, she said gently. That night, Barron sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. His father's words echoed in his mind. You need to use it. But Barron didn't want to just use the attention. He wanted to build something meaningful, something that was his. He grabbed his sketchbook and started drawing. This time, he didn't plan or think too much. He just let the pencil move across the page. By the time he finished, it was nearly midnight. He held up the drawing. A boy standing at the edge of a forest, looking at a bright, open field ahead. Barron smiled. It felt right. The next day, Barron met with his mother in the garden. She was sitting on a bench, sipping tea and enjoying the quiet. Barron joined her, holding his sketchbook. "Mama," he began, "can I talk to you?" "Of course, my love," Melania said, setting down her cup. "What is on your mind?" Barron opened his sketchbook and showed her the drawing. "This is how I feel," he said, "like I'm standing here, not sure which way to go, but I think I want to do something creative." Melania studied the drawing for a moment, her face thoughtful. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "You have a gift, Barron, and if this is what makes you happy, then you should follow it." "But what about Dad?" Barron asked. "He wants me to do something big, something important." Melania placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father wants you to be successful, but success does not have to mean the same thing for everyone. You can be successful by being true to yourself." Inspired by his mother's words, Barron decided to explore his passion. He started sharing his drawings with a small group of trusted friends and teachers. Their feedback was encouraging, and for the first time, Barron felt like he was building something that was his own. But as he worked on his art, he also returned to soccer. Being on the field gave him a sense of freedom and focus that nothing else could. His days were filled with practice, sketching, and moments of quiet reflection. It wasn't always easy, but it felt right. One day, during soccer practice, Barron's coach pulled him aside. "Barron, I've noticed something," he said, his tone serious. Barron felt his stomach drop. "What is it?" "You've got talent," the coach said. "Real talent. Have you ever thought about taking soccer to the next level?" Barron blinked, surprised. "You mean, like, playing professionally?" The coach nodded. "It's not going to be easy. It'll take hard work, discipline, and focus. But I think you've got what it takes." Barron felt a spark of excitement, but also doubt. Could he really do it? Could he juggle his love for soccer and art? And what would his father think? That evening, Barron sat down with his parents to talk. He told them about the coach's words and his dreams of pursuing both soccer and art. Donald listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When Barron finished, there was a long pause. "You want to do both?" Donald asked finally. "Yes," Barron said firmly. "I love both. And I think I can make it work." Donald leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "It's going to be tough," he said. "Balancing two passions isn't easy, but if anyone can do it, it's you." Barron's eyes widened. You mean that? Donald nodded. You've shown me something over the past few weeks, Barron. You've got drive. You've got heart. That's what it takes to succeed, no matter what you choose. Melania smiled. Her eyes filled with pride. We are here for you, Barron, she said. Always. Over the next few months, Barron threw himself into his work. He practiced soccer every day, pushing himself harder than ever. He also started sharing his art online, gaining a small but loyal following. His sketches of life, dreams, and emotions connected with people in ways he hadn't expected. The world began to see him not just as Trump's son, but as Barron, a young man finding his place in the world. One evening, as Barron sat in his room, scrolling through the comments on his latest artwork, he saw a message that stood out. Thank you for sharing this. It reminds me that it's okay to be myself. Barron smiled, his heart full. For the first time, he felt like he was stepping out of his father's shadow and into his own light. Chapter 12. Becoming Barron. The stadium lights shone brightly, casting long shadows across the soccer field. Barron stood on the sideline, the cool evening breeze brushing against his face. He could hear the murmur of the crowd, the distant sound of cheers and clapping. His heart raced, not with fear, but with excitement. This was his moment. Months of hard work had led to this. Balancing soccer and art had been one of the biggest challenges of his life. Early mornings on the field, late nights at his desk, pencil in hand. There were days when he wanted to give up, when the weight of it all felt too heavy. But he didn't. He kept going. And now, he was here, about to play in his first major match. The referee blew the whistle, signaling the start of the game. Barron jogged onto the field, his teammates shouting encouragement. He felt a wave of energy as the ball moved quickly across the grass. He had played hundreds of games before, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher, the crowd was louder, and for the first time, people weren't just watching him because of his name. They were watching him because of his talent. As the game went on, Barron found his rhythm. He passed the ball with precision, dodged defenders, and chased it down the field with determination. Every move felt natural, like he was doing exactly what he was meant to do. Then came the moment. A teammate passed the ball to him, and Barron saw the opportunity. The goal was clear. The defenders were closing in. He took a deep breath, focused, and kicked with all his strength. The ball soared through the air and landed perfectly in the net. The crowd erupted into cheers. His teammates ran to him, shouting his name and patting his back. Barron couldn't stop smiling. He had done it, not for his father, not for anyone else, but for himself. After the game, as Barron walked off the field, he spotted his parents in the crowd. Melania was clapping, her face glowing with pride. Donald gave him a thumbs up, his grin wide and genuine. Barron felt a warmth in his chest. For the first time, he felt like they saw him. not as the president's son, but as Barron. That night, as he sat in his room, Barron picked up his sketchbook. The events of the day were still fresh in his mind. The cheers, the goal, the feeling of accomplishment. He began to draw, letting his pencil capture the emotion. When he finished, he stared at the page. It was a picture of himself, standing on the soccer field, surrounded by light. In the background, there were no shadows, no crowds, just an open field and a bright, endless sky. The next morning, Barron's drawing went viral. He had shared it online with a simple caption. "This is how it feels to be me." The response was overwhelming. People from all over the world commented, praising his talent and honesty. Some shared their own stories of feeling misunderstood or trapped by expectations. Others simply thanked him for being brave enough to share his journey. Barron read every comment, his heart full. He realized that his art wasn't just about him anymore. It was about connection, about showing people that it was okay to be themselves. As time went on, Barron continued to grow. His soccer skills improved, and he became known for his creativity on the field. His art also gained recognition, with galleries inviting him to showcase his work. He was living in two worlds, sports and art. But for the first time, he felt balanced. He wasn't just Trump's son. He wasn't just a name in the headlines. He was Barron, a young man finding his own way in a complicated world. One evening, Barron sat with his parents in the White House garden. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the flowers and trees. "I'm proud of you, Barron," Donald said, his voice softer than usual. "You've worked hard to get where you are, and you've done it your way." Melania smiled, her hand resting on Barron's shoulder. "You have shown strength, my love," she said, "and kindness. That is what makes you special." Barron looked at his parents, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for believing in me." That night, Barron sat at his desk, staring out at the city lights. He thought about everything he had been through, the struggles, the pressure, the doubts. But he also thought about the lessons he had learned, about the people who had supported him, about the dreams he had yet to chase. He picked up his sketchbook and turned to a blank page. Slowly, he began to draw. This time, he drew a path winding through a forest, leading to a bright horizon. Along the path were footprints, each one leading farther and farther away from the shadows. When he finished, Barron smiled. The drawing wasn't just art. It was a reflection of his journey. A journey that was far from over. As he closed the sketchbook, Barron felt a sense of peace. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time, he felt ready to face them. He wasn't just living in someone else's shadow anymore. He was stepping into his own light. He was becoming Barron.